First up are these chunky wooden pieces. Is this not the cutest little wheelbarrow? I can see somebody using it in their decor, putting a plant in it, fake or real. I absolutely love the condition it's in, but I know I need to update it a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and tape off that wheel along with the pegs that help it stand up, so when I go to paint it, that stays wood. This type of wood is that type that will bleed through my white paint. I know, surprise, I'm going to be painting them white. So I'm going to go ahead and seal it in first with a couple coats of shellac. After about 3 coats of paint in 4 just to touch up any other area that I felt was translucent, now I'm just going back in after the paint has dried and I'm just using the Kills paint and primer, and I'm going to go ahead and heavily distress, bringing back some of that beautiful wood that's underneath. This is just going to pop out those details that were kind of hidden all in that brown wood. Now that I have them distressed the way that I like them, I'm going to go ahead and seal that white paint in using some polyacrylic. And I know that there are sure were probably people that loved this blue color, but the rust and the age and the wear at the bottom of these did not make me comfortable for reselling them. And I really like to do the Enamelware. So the inside luckily is in great shape. So I'm just going to tape that off and protect it. Now I really like to do the farm implement paint in the spray can for the Enamelware, but as I was spraying this on, I quickly realized that it was not going to cover up the damage that was on this piece, so I went ahead and finished spraying it just lightly, and then I had to go back in with my Rust-Oleum red primer to make sure that it was going to cover it all up. The red primer is wonderful for covering up the lettering, covering up the rust marks that are at the bottom so that it won't bleed through the top coat of white paint. Now, because I put that primer underneath, the Farm Implement white paint got great coverage in one coat. But as you see, I'm always moving my can. I'm always moving my Lazy Susan so as not to be spraying in one place for very long. That way I don't get any drips or runs. Now to do my black accent, we have a gallon of the Farm Implement paint, say that a couple times, in black that we actually use to spray our outdoor furniture. Oh my gosh, love it. So now I'm just doing all those little details that just make that look like the Enamelware. Then I let that dry overnight before flipping it over and finding any of the dents that were just way too obvious, and then just touch them up with some of that black paint. The only downside of using the farm implement paint is no paint will stick onto it, but I absolutely love the color, so I just cricketed out some vinyl letters using the permanent vinyl of the Oracle 651 Coffee and Tea, just a basic font, and now I'm just going to go ahead and attach the letters. So now we're going to start off with this cute little caddy, and I really thought I was going to be painting this piece, and then thought I could take off the handle. That didn't work. This is nice strong metal, so I decided to tape off the handle. Then before matching up a paint color, I decided that a lot of these pieces will be getting some decoupage paper. So as I'm pulling out this piece, I absolutely love advertisement. I love wording and picking out, look at that space in the middle, fits out perfectly, but there's no need to paint it. I think after I got it all cleaned, it was good enough. It just looked nice and distressed. The color of the paint on the little cubby itself matched the coloring of this decoupage paper. Now I print these off of Zazzle, and then you can size them to what you want them to be. So I order many different sizes so I can use them on cubbies like this, or bread boxes, or little boxes, or I get the big ones where I can do them on windows or pieces of furniture. So it was nice to have this piece on hand. So yep, I do kind of have a stockpile of decoupage paper because you just never know what items you're going to thrift. So now to apply it to the box, I'm just going to try to center it and then just use some polyacrylic as the adhesive. Now normally I would start to cut the paper and just make it into two, but I think I really like it. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it. So when I do the polyacrylic or Mod Podge as the adhesive, I usually let it dry before moving on to seal it in with the same product. So all I'm going to do is go from behind and kind of tighten up that paper with some polyacrylic, hoping that it thickens it up. I think it'll be fine. I'm sure eventually it will come apart, but for right now, I like it as is. As much as I liked the outer of the box, I didn't really like the bad paint job on the handle, so I'm just going to go in with some black paint and give that a couple coats, and then do a little distressing and seal that in with some polyacrylic just to give it that pop to match the writing on the decoupage paper. now I have the leftover two pieces where I cut the center out of that decoupage paper. And so I have this little barnwood cubby that I just could see some writing on. So I'm kind of playing with the two pieces. And yeah, so the bigger one's going to go on the bottom, the other one's going to go on the top where the wording fits. So same thing, I'm just going to polyacrylic it on. I let it completely dry. Now the paper is really easy to cut by sanding it off. So that's all I'm doing is taking some 220 sandpaper, going back and forth on that sharp edge, and that will just cut a nice crisp line and make it that it's a clean edge and there's no overhang. Now, even though that wording fit, there was something about the way the top wording swirled and the bottom wording curved. It just kind of seemed out of sorts to me. So I went to my stockpile of hardware to see what I might have that I could place on this just to give it a little bit of more of a visual so it looks like it was made to be this way. So I was actually looking for one that I could a hardware piece that I could just drill in and not have to try to put a screw from behind. And if you notice the one thing about the auction haul, that there was a lot of Americana decor in there. So a lot of the pieces that I'm be making over today are some of the Americana that I didn't really think would resell for me. So I'm going to be making them over, including this little box. So I sanded it nice and smooth, tried to get all the paint that I could off of it, and then really taped it off because I want to leave that natural. But I'm not sure what paint was used, and a lot of times red will bleed through, so I pre-conditioned the wood using the shellac spray, a couple coats to even it out, and now I'm just going to go over the top and the bottom, which looks black, but it was blue, with some black paint. I'm sure you're wondering, if I was painting that black, why did I have to seal that in with some shellac? Well, that's to even out their porosity so you don't see those stars and stripes coming through. But I am going to be adding some decoupage paper. I have a leftover piece that I thought would be perfect for the top of this. I just love the natural and that black together. So yes, if I wouldn't have sealed that in when it came to polyacrylicing the decoupage paper, that red could have bled through the paper. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of distressing on the bottom since I sanded the top to cut the paper off. It gave it a little bit of distressing so the top and the bottom will be matching. And then before sealing my paper in, I'm going to go ahead and use some antiquing wax just to give a little bit more age to that paper, just around that outer edge, and fade it in. So next project I'm working on is this red crate. Now the bottom had a loose piece of this hardware. I absolutely love the color of the hardware. So I'm just going to use some CA glue to get it tacked back down. Now even though I'm probably going to cover this whole thing up, it's a really weird texture. It's really dry. It's really grabby. So I'm going to go ahead and get this sealed in with some shellac also. But I love the color of the hardware, those corner protectors, but I don't want to spend the time to tape them all off to protect them because there's a lot of them. So I'm going to go in with a paintbrush and some Vaseline and use that as a protective so they don't get painted on, or the paint actually doesn't stay. I just got this painted all up with Rust-Oleum's paint and primer in the flat black. Now I'm going to go back in and seal it in with some polyacrylic. Before moving on to my next step of adding some decoupage paper to this piece, I'm going to go ahead and take a wet wipe. I've got a bucket of water next to me, and as you see, yes, the Vaseline acted like a protective, and it didn't allow the paint to stick to this hardware. Now we're going to have some fun with this box. So I went to my stash and I thought this paper matches that hardware and the black that I'm going to be leaving the inside perfectly. So now I just need to figure out what squares of numbers I need to cut off to add to these slats. So this is one of those projects that you have to do the two sides first, let that dry, then I can go back in and do the other side. But while this side is already dry, I'm going to share with you how I just take an X-Acto knife, cut between those slats. That way I have something that I'm not going to be trying to pull it off. It's dry, but then I can go back in with the sandpaper and cut it nice and flush. So next up is this 4-section cubby. Yet again, it's one of the Americana pieces. I'm going to go ahead and sand off most of the paint that I can. That way that there's not a texture that you see underneath the paint or the decoupage paper. Because red likes to bleed through, I'm going to make sure that I don't have any problems with my finish and seal this in with some shellac. And I want to leave the inside of this that natural wood that it already is, so I'm just going to go in and hand paint the rest of this piece with black. Now that my black paint is dry, I'm going to go ahead and seal the whole entire piece in using some polyacrylic. I'm only going to be putting the decoupage paper on the one side, the farm, the top of this other section, this is actually a half section that some grain sack striping came on. Oh, it fits perfectly on the front of this. So I went ahead and distressed the sides, bringing it down to all the way to the wood, just to give it some distressed look. But now I need to go back in, and at the top of this, the little slats are painted blue still. So I need to go in and paint these very gingerly by hand. That's a lot of taping I'd have to do. So I'm just going to go in with a small paintbrush, paint those black, and then I'll need to go back in and just like the sides, seal it in with polyacrylic. And then this piece actually had these rusted colored handles on the side, so even though I didn't show taking them off when I was cleaning it, I'm going to add them back onto it. Now, next up is this little cubby box, and yep, I'm going to be making this one over. I know I got a lot of response of people that liked it because of the peanut company that it was and where it was. So I am so sorry, but I know you have to know your clientele and what will sell for you. And I know that if I put this in our booth, it will just sit. So, yep, I'm going to go ahead and get this apart, take the hardware off, and give this a new life. Pine pieces are really raw, so even though it's painted, it may look like it doesn't have texture. They're always raw. They're always lots of texture. You can see the knots through them. They're not smooth to the touch, so I'm going to go ahead and get this sanded smooth. And then even though you can't feel that the writing, the stamping, however they attach this is raised, I still need to try to get most of that off. It could cause problems in the long run. And then pine pieces are really dry, so I'm going to go ahead and seal them in with a couple coats of the shellac. Now I want to add just the chicken's head to the front of this cubby box. So I'm just trying to center it appropriate. This is the other half of another piece that's a two-piece of the decoupage paper. So I really like that chicken's head, and it actually is a good seller for me. So yeah, see how this is actually the second half to a two-part piece of the decoupage paper. Then if you noticed, I painted the front of the cubby white. So the white is actually going to make the paper pop a little bit more. If I would have left it that wood color, it might have made it look more of a brown aged paper, but I really wanted this to pop, so I went my background as white. So a balled up piece of saran wrap is what I'm using to help remove the wrinkles, get any air bubbles out, and I really do think that it helps because sometimes your fingers are a little too strong, and when you're moving around that wet paper, it will tear easily, and I find if I use the saran wrap, I don't have those problems. And while this is still a little bit wet, I'm going in and releasing that pressure on those corners so I will be able to fold and have a nice look little package. For the hardware, I don't want it to scream. I just freshly painted hardware by using Rust-Oleum. So I'm going to go in with some of the ebony rub and buff and just kind of give, it won't completely cover this hardware, but it'll give that aged dark look to it. Now that we don't just have wood laying on top of wood that could easily scrape somebody's surface that they put this on, I'm going to go ahead and add these little rubber feet that just screw in. I buy these in a pack of, I don't know how many actually, from Amazon, but they are handy. My previous holes got painted, filled in, and so especially with the paper and the polyacrylic, yep, it's definitely they're gone. So I need to pre-drill some holes before getting the screws put back into this hardware. But I also feel as if it needs a handle, so I just went to our stash. There again, I was looking for something that I could just screw in and not have to go from the opposite side, and I like the patina of this handle. I could put a little rub and buff on it to match the hinges, which is what I did, and now I'm just going to center it and attach it to this piece. So I feel like this paint job on this piece is just the same as the smaller 4-drawer cupboard where I needed to sand off the raised paint, try to get it nice and smooth, seal that in with shellac, get it painted up black, seal the black in with polyacrylic. So it's really just a repeat, but boy do I have another plan now. So I'm actually going to make some holders. So not only will it be a 9-drawer cubby, but we'll have some more interest. And I just went into our wood stash to see what I had, and I had these nice thin piece of wood that are very easy to cut with a Japanese saw. So all I'm doing now is I just measured off from the bottom. I put a pencil mark, and the Japanese saw, like I said, is really easy to use. It's really sharp, guys, but with it being a thin wood, I can just go by hand and cut it. These pieces are raw wood, and no, paint sticks wouldn't have worked. They were too short, and then paint sticks always have that round edge on it. But these are raw, so I need to get these sanded smooth. For attaching them, I want to make sure that I get that crusty edge where paint always builds up, that I have a nice clean front. And also before attaching them, I want to stain them. I think my Waverly Wax is going to match what the inside of that stain is. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it on. If it starts to look a little too dark, I could take a white wipe and take some off. But this is really dry wood, so it's soaking it right in. And then after that dries, I'm going to go ahead and seal them in with polyacrylic. Now to make sure that my slats stay on, I'm going to run a bead of Type Bond wood glue underneath before getting these brad nailed in. But wait, we are not quite done yet. So I want these little file. Oh my goodness, what are they called? You know, you always get that lost for words, but they're cute little additives to this piece. And actually, yes, I did get them in the paper craft section at Hobby Lobby, and they were on clearance. So I needed 9 of them. There was not 9 of a matching set. They were matching, but the colors were different. So, well, we're going to spray paint them black anyway. So perfect. Now, the only thing is that they don't come with any kind of screws or nails to put them on. So luckily, we do have a stash of that kind of supplies. So I'm just doing the smallest nails that I possibly have. And if they didn't match, I can rub and buff them to match, whichever, but I was lucky enough to have little ones that matched. So I'm just going to hold them with needle nose pliers, trying to find ones that didn't go all the way through that slat, and then just hammer them in. And the hardest part of this is just I'm centering it in each individual box using my smaller ruler, just eyeballing the best I can as center. So it may be a little bit off here or there, but you know, it's a handmade piece. My last makeover is going to be this little picnic basket. So there again, I need to go ahead and take off as much of that paint as I can. And then thinking that the stars are raised, I need to make sure that those are nice and smooth. And it is still that raw pine that is very uneven and actually is hard to sand, but I'm going to try my best. And yep, I'm going to go in really gingerly with my spray can of shellac and just try to get these slats to make sure that I'm sealing in that raw wood along with whatever paint I just couldn't get off. So I actually have an awesome idea of what paper I'm going to be using on these slats, but I'm going to go ahead and do a back color of that white paint so that my decoupage paper would pop and not pick up that underlying paint colors. Now, yes, I would have loved the number 3 to be shown on the slats, but it just really wasn't doable. The slats are too small. It wouldn't have made too much sense. But I love the ticking. I love that webbing. So that is what I'm going to be using. And if you recognize the other half of this paper, yep, I used this earlier. So if you notice, it's not quite large enough to fit the whole top, and you could leave the white as is if you wanted to, but I want to see that grain sack all the way through, so I have other pieces that have the grain sack on it. Now this is the 10 pound, this is the lighter tissue paper type, so you really did want to do that white background on this because it's tissue paper and it's really see-through. So I just cut a usable strip off there. Now I'm going to try to match up my ticking stripes. So we'll see how that goes and then apply it. I'm going to try not to overlap it on that webbing too awful much either. Now I waited for my polyacrylic to dry underneath, and now I'm going in with a very sharp X-Acto knife and cutting in between those slats. And I'm going to do that same where I go in with the sandpaper and sand it nice and smooth, but I need to release that tension of pulling on the paper with the X-Acto knife cut. And I just by chance have these Enamelware numbers from Hobby Lobby. I picked them up. Was only a 1, 2, and a 3 when I picked them up. So I kind of thought that I would always use them on like a coat rack, but I just never came across anything. But I kind of missed that 3 that I saw earlier on this ticking stripe. So I'm like, yeah, hey, I have that. So I'm going to do a number 2. I'm just going to use some black wire to pull it through the webbing to make it nice and tight.